which means we are ready to start. And I begin by saying hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this Virtuoso webinar, Test Automation for Dynamics 365, 12 monthly releases, too easy. My name is Ryan Thornton. I am VP of Marketing, coming from a product marketing background, and it is incumbent upon me, an absolute pleasure and a contractual obligation to lead you through the next 30 minutes. Before we start asking in the Q&A panel if this webinar will be recorded, it will, and will be being whisked out to you tomorrow. I am aided and abetted by my loyal partner in test, a man without compare. So why would you try? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Bent, our VP of Solutions Engineering.
Welcome. Thank you, Ryan. And you know what? You've done such a good job of introing me. I shall just simply say hello and look forward to running this webinar with you again.
Why improve upon perfection? And so, yeah, that's where we're at. And you're going to now see a slide that's not quite perfection because it's the one that should have been there when we were introducing ourselves, but it's there for your amusement briefly. As we go on, night follows day, the agenda follows the introductions. We will be looking at the current pressures surrounding test automation within Dynamics 365, process changes that can occur to aid, and indeed new technology. A fool with a tool is still a fool, as that great mantra goes. So we'll be looking at both process and the new technology. Then we're getting into the juicy bit. We've got an instance of Dynamics 365, and we'll show you just how we're able to overcome some of the challenges. And there will be a question and answer session at the very end. There is a Q&A bit in the Zoom, so if you would like to put your questions in there, please feel more than free to do so. And we will start with an introduction to Virtuoso. This is the marketing hype. I do try to keep it less marketing and more product. Ship gets done faster with Virtuoso. We deliver the power of code with the ease of codeless and empower anyone to create robust and reliable functional end-to-end and integration tests for their web applications. It's completely codelessly, but we use natural language programming, which you will see James will more than adequately show you how that works. But it does keep a lot of the power of code, but increase the accessibility, which you'll see. It's an easy to use platform that gives you a shipstorm, the good type, obviously. So Dynamics 365, it's a CRM. It's a grown-up CRM. It's cloud-based, and it's pushing the boundaries of what the internet was first intended to do. It's complex with interlinked modules. There's configurations galore. Depending where you are, there's a variety of data, which is always increasing. And it needs to integrate with your multiple systems. I'm sure I'm teaching people how to suck eggs here and saying things that all sound very familiar. There's lots of customizations, but it can be hard to test. And there are 12, I think, currently monthly releases by which you need to be, ready to test and are obligatory that you need to take on. So all CRMs, including Dynamics 365, really require considerations to data. Though we don't live in a perfect world, and you may need to find ways around having perfect data. Integrations, workflows, end-to-end journeys, configurations, and customizations. Put quite simply, you don't test Dynamics 365, you're on a sticky wicket or up a creek without a paddle, to use a less English metaphor, and that can happen quite quickly. Change one thing over here, and without knowing it, it impacts 10 things over there. I believe that's called a regression. I'm sure you all know it, but test it and test it well, and Dynamics 365 can remain an incredibly valuable tool. Which brings us on to the preamble that James Bent will go through into showing you actually how we're going to do the things I've boldly claimed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. And it was bold, but it's all true. And we'll show you how. And what are we going to show you? Well, we're going to talk about how you can functionally test any browser-based application, which does, we're going to look at Dynamics 365, but to be really clear, this could be any browser-based application. So if you also use an SAP S/4HANA or you have front-end browser-based portals, then they're all fine as well. So that does include any CRM system, including Dynamics 365. Could be multiple modules with interlinked flows. So create accounts, create contacts, create opportunities, all using data that goes through them. Plus also test the integrations with other systems and portals via our API testing. So functional test with APIs to create end-to-end integrated flows that focus on how a user actually goes through from end to end. And then we're going to be talking about how you can data drive your testing, even for dynamic things like, creating an account reference, for example, on the fly. And we'll show you how you can do that in Virtuoso using natural language to live author. So you get real-time feedback as you're building tests, build it from requirements, then execute, do it from plans, CI/CD with reports, screenshots, be able to debug test failures, and then how our self-healing works to really reduce down very significantly test maintenance. And then how you do things like managing your test data and then do parallel testing. So an awful lot to cover, but we will do it efficiently and in the spirit of show, not tell. So thank you very much. Show me, demo time. So let me steal the screen from you, Ryan. And let's get into it. So what are we talking about? Dynamics 365 testing with Virtuoso. So on screen, you can see we have Dynamics 365, which we are creating tests against. And we're doing that using Virtuoso's natural language, which literally at its simplest form says, if I can see on screen that there is a next button that I want to click, I can simply click on next. So use our natural language syntax with what I see on the screen. You don't need to refer to selectors or XPath or IDs or write tests in code. It's literally natural language based on what I see on the screen. When you fire up tests, if you're working on a live environment of Dynamics 365, or again, any browser-based application, you get a live browser window, which loads up the application, so Dynamics 365. And then you can start writing the tests immediately, almost as if you're exploring or doing manual testing. The great thing here is with the natural language is it's pretty extensive. So it's not just about those simple things like, clicking on buttons or just writing in boxes. What we'll talk about extensively is how you data drive your tests with Virtuoso, but then also do things like put in assertions. So validate the outputs of testing. This is a test automation platform. So in that sphere, just to sort of give you an idea first, what we're doing here is breaking our tests into goals, which are like your test sets, into which you create your journeys. So we call our test journeys because you do focus more on sort of user-oriented flows or journeys through the applications. And then we're splitting the journey into reusable checkpoints. So I've got my login steps. I'm opening up the Sales Hub, creating an account, a contact, then going through things like adding opportunities to searching the opportunities, adding notes, updating stages. Even we'll talk about making API calls in conjunction with your functional flows. So you really start looking at how you build flows across modules, which might be to emulate, let's say, what a sales rep does. They come in, they create their account and their contact, and then their opportunity against that. That's an actual end-to-end flow they're working. So using the natural language, we can go through and perform each of those steps. As we're doing that, we're capturing all the screenshots. So you get the automated testing evidence captured for each of the interactions. But then again, aside from sort of the more functional steps, there's then a really strong focus on how you data drive your tests. So with any data-driven platform like a CRM system, it's probably one of the most data-driven platforms there is. It's really sort of typically an issue testing in these systems because either if you're in a test site, you don't know what data is available. So the data you might have had in your test script yesterday might already been used. Somebody's burned the opportunity or deleted the account. So, instead of relying on you having to spend a lot of time managing your test data, you can do things like here, we're generating a random company name on the fly as the test is running. So you could do company names, you could do contact first name, last name, email addresses, phone numbers, and so on. Create that dynamically or randomly as the test is running. You can also be powering your tests with test data. So we can come in and create test data sets. This might be more for fixed values that are within the platform. So it could be pipeline stages. You might create a variable with pipeline stage and then come through and create all of your scenarios with the different pipeline stages based on the scenarios you want to run. So you can define those and then assign your data table into the test to basically then start mapping those variables into certain points. Aside from that, really one of the other really powerful things is to start using, as we touched on very briefly, API calls. And we enable that because we have an API testing manager. You could import collections of APIs into the platform or build your API calls automatically with the inputs, things like the type of call, endpoints, authorizations, headers, bodies, and so on. So imagine this could be, you might do this for data setup or getting data to test with. You might make an API call to call the Dynamics Opportunities API to get details of existing opportunities, store them into the response, and then either assert or use those API details. So at the start of your test, when you're testing your CRM, make an API call to get the details of accounts so that on that particular day, you don't have to worry about seeding data or understanding what data is in the application. You can get it. But equally, you combine then your functional steps to be able to say, in this case, what we're actually doing is as we go through and functionally test the application, the CRM, then we're also storing data. So for example, up here, I've got it where I'm storing the order ID shown on screen into a variable. So as I go into this, could be an order management system, and I generate an order ID, I can store that in a variable. And then it might be that then later on, I either put that into another part of the Dynamics 365. So I'm writing it into the opportunity, as we can see here. So that variable we've stored. But then I could also pass that into an API call. So I can basically pass that stored data, whether it's the opportunity name, whether it's the order ID, I can pass those into an API to test if data is integrated, maybe from Dynamics 365 into, let's say, the ERP module of Dynamics 365. So it's very much about creating these sort of integrated tests. In terms of how this actually is working, so we have, or enable you rather, to use what we call live authoring. So I could come through, and for the live authoring, it means that when you first start running your test, you get the live browser window, which will load up the application. So we can see that you get taken to the login screen, for example. And then what I could do is start writing my test steps immediately. So I could come in and let's say, let's write james.b@virtuoso.qa into email phone. So that's what I can see on the screen, just as the sort of the prompt in the input field here. And when I do that, Virtuoso then runs the step, writes in the box, and we can see the step's gone green. So you author your step, runs it, and if it goes green, you can then see that we're capturing the screenshots as to where it's been written and the after result, which is the email has been put in there. And then let's say I could click on next, for example. So again, it's literally what I'm seeing on screen I can author against, and then you're seeing that immediately works. And in this case, based on that email, it's taking me to GitHub to sign in. I might come in and let's say I want to go and I want to, let's say, write james.b@virtuoso.qa, but in this case, I spell username incorrectly. And it tries to run the step, it will then fail, and then I could click on username email address, it fixes that for me, and then runs it. So the whole purpose here is enabling you to use the live authoring with natural language to be able to write steps without dropping into code. But then even if you get it wrong for some reason, then having that sort of fixed step to be able to click on screen and then get this written correctly. Even if then you've got a logo you want to click on up here, which doesn't have a label, you actually get access into the dev tools. So I could come in, click on that logo and see that it's called header logo, for example. So then I might want to say click header logo to be able to use that to be able to click on, as we've just done there. So again, while you're dropping a little bit into the dev tools there, it's not really onerous. And you just got that easy access if you need it to go and grab, let's say, a class name. Now, when I click on I'm done here, what we're doing automatically is Virtuoso is looking in the DOM level. So we're deploying bots to look at the site from the front end like a user would. And we're automatically identifying and populating all of the available selectors here. So XPath and IDs and class names for each of the steps. So we automatically build the model of the element. Now, in most cases, you don't really need to know this, except to know that we use that information to then, when you rerun the test, so when you execute this, which I'll do manually, you can also hook this into CI/CD tools. You can run execution plans to be able to schedule and orchestrate how you run the tests. It means that every time we run it, we're going to be using that full model of the elements to be able to run this. So you can see here, we got an execution that ran on the 1st of November, just a minute ago. We can see I did this on my dev environment. So we can specify and actually build out different environments. So you could define, let's say, if you have a dev environment of Dynamics, a staging environment, production environment, you can define each of those environments, each with things like URLs, usernames, and passwords, and so on. But then when I come in, I can see that what we've done is we've then run the test. We can see it's all gone green. We can see screenshots that have been captured. So I can validate these. So, and anybody in principle can read through what I was doing. So it's all about creating very readable tests that have all the evidence captured automatically, including things like looking at network requests and console logs that are also captured automatically for these steps, to be able to just assist and say, even if it ran, maybe you just want to have a look at the network to see if there's any sort of failures. What I'm going to do now is just fire this up and just put in a bug, so we can start to look at actually what happens when we get testing issues in terms of the debugging and the reporting on issues. Because, of course, as you go through your various flows and you configure things in Dynamics, or maybe there's a release and you just go through and something breaks, it's really important to be able to then be able to firstly run all of your tests, which if you've got a whole bundle of tests in your goal, in your test set, as we've got here, we can run all of these, run those in parallel. So run them at the same time, so you benefit from the scalability. But then we can see that if there are issues, as we're going to see in a second in this, when we hit the bug that I've just put in. So we're allowing a little bit of time for that to run, and then we'll see that that will fail through a bug. There we go. So we can see that our journey has failed. We can see it was on the dev environment where it was being run. And then we can see that if we click on bug, we can see it's because there's no such element. So I might say, well, fine, that's might just be a test issue, and I need to update my test step. If that were an actual development issue, so I could see that actually that element exists, I expect it to be interacted with in the way that, in this case, I want to click on it, then you could bring one of your engineers in, or your administrators at Dynamics 365, where they could review things like the root cause analysis, which actually says by clicking on here, number one, they can read through first to see what was being done. So they've got all the context and the screenshots. But then they can access our page source. They're rendering the page source through the root cause analysis at the time the test was running. Look at the page network, where we can see that there is a client error here being returned, and also an error on the page console logs. So you might get one of your engineers or admins to come in and start seeing, actually, maybe this is an issue because something on the network, or it could be an API call that failed to fire. But then one of the great benefits here is those, let's say one of your engineers or admins can actually go through and say, well, okay, I want to replay through that. I know it failed on this step, so I'm going to put a pause point just there. And then they could go through and start looking at the dev tools for things like the XHR, the console logs, to be able to start looking through and seeing, as I replayed through this, I can see that, yeah, there's an API call that failed to fire here, or got a 400. So it just gives them the means to be able to replicate this without having to go in and manually go and replay through and then go and look at different logging tools to be able to see what was going wrong. Across the top of this as well, what we are using from the side of things, which is around the maintenance of tests, particularly where you have things like dynamic changes occurring in different environments, then you can see that within, let's say, dynamics, you can get instances where things like IDs might change or XPaths are updated. In those cases, in other automation, particularly frameworks, you might find that it breaks the automation if you're trying to identify an element on an XPath or an ID that dynamically changes. So what Virtuoso is doing here is saying on every test run, we're using the previous working model of the elements to go through and basically identify that if there are changes, and we can actually see here, we've got the new contact, which, the label looks like it stayed the same on the screen. But actually what's happening, like in other CRM systems, is because I'm loading a new contact form, in this case, it's assigning new IDs to that form. So I can see that actually it's got dynamically assigned IDs, class names, or CSS is changing, and the class changing down here. Instead of that breaking the test, Virtuoso is using the machine learning algorithms to, with confidence, identify it's still the same element, and then we're automatically healing that. So fixing it without you having to do anything. So as you can see down here, all of these sticking plasters are all instances where self-healing has occurred. And you can imagine that if you had to go through and fix all of these because of, let's say, they're all to do with dynamic changes or updates, as you can see here, they're quite significant. The amount of time that would typically take if you were using more coded automation would be pretty onerous. Whereas this is one of the speed benefits with Virtuoso in terms of the speed to create the test using the natural language, but then the reduction in time to spend having to maintain tests. So you can actually start thinking more about creating more expansive user-focused end-to-end tests, even where those do go across multiple applications and involve things like API calls, as we've got, if I scroll down here, just here. So it really means to say that data-driven functional UI integration and end-to-end tests of browser-based applications, especially things like Dynamics 365, to be able to start doing this relatively complex level of testing aligned to user workflows, but doing so at speed for the creation, execute at scale with parallel testing, run different data scenarios, and then rely on the test reporting to be able to get clear insights so you can have that certainty and get things fixed through the debugging. And then finally, with the self-healing, being able to take care of otherwise flaky changes which might cause other automation to break. So hopefully that's given a good, if albeit a whirlwind tour of Virtuoso on Dynamics 365, stressing that, again, we're focused on any browser-based application. So if you say, would this also work on my front-end portal or my instance of SAP S/4HANA or other system? The answer is, if it's in a browser and it's functional UI, integration, or end-to-end testing, we can cover it. So with that, Ryan, I think we can jump to one of our favorite next steps, which is questions and answers. And you're on mute. It's almost like we had this rehearsed. We're so slick.
Occasionally I have to I have to play the fool, reverse the roles, don't I? So if you do have any questions for the straight man in our double act, please put them in the Q&A. We've got a couple in already, and let's have a quick look. Open. So this is you're gonna like this question, James. So there is the tried and tested kind of concepts of test suite, test plans. I think you can go further with cases and steps. Do we have those concepts within Virtuoso?
Yeah, you'll have to repeat that, Ryan. My children just came in the door from school, and I'm afraid they've been in the rain. So just repeat that one for me. I apologize.
Okay, so that tried and tested method of test suites, test plans.
Yeah.
We're not calling out test cases or test steps here, but I think we could, and smart folders, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the structure of, you have an organization into which you can create projects. Then you have goals which roughly align to test sets. And then you can run, let's say, an orchestrated plan, which would be like your test run or your test plan. So absolutely, we have the same structure as well as integrations into things like CI/CD, into TestRail, into things like X-Ray. So yeah, that same, basically, we've built this as a test automation platform, which fits in the way that people work, albeit at speed and ease of use. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And actually, you've raised something I've never really thought of before, and that is that we've built it in a way that yes, you can use that, or if you want to create longer journeys, you can do that. You can kind of use it, and I know that was something that the dev team really wanted to do. It fits into the way that you work, and the way that you want to do things. And if that is test suites, test plans, it is a bit of a change in nomenclature, but it does fit straight in. You picked up on CI/CD there, and we've got another one about some automation to create tickets directly to Jira if there are fails.
Yeah, so the answer is not just yet, but in about a week or two, we're releasing a Jira integration, which will be basically a push integration, so that if a test fails, you could pick a step and then push into Jira, including creating in a project with all the description, ticket types, and then have a sync basically as that gets worked on in Jira to basically push back status updates. So yeah, we're about to have that being released because we recognize that, you know what, the output of testing most commonly is if there are issues, you need someone to work on it. So yeah, and Jira being one of the top tools there. Straight after that, we'll be working on GitHub as well. So yeah, that's coming imminently.
And they, just to clarify, they are both, all of those are out of the box. We are an open API, and therefore you can integrate it with anything else that you may desire. And we have lots of integrations, but these are the kind of the out of the box, it just works ones. And then another API related question. Azure DevOps, which you can send the results of test execution. So basically the same question as before, and the answer is yes, and some out of the box to come in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the good thing with CI/CD is that we have scripts available that automatically call our APIs that you can embed in your CI/CD pipeline, including Azure DevOps and others, and then being pushed back test results as well. So the answer is yes, that is supported.
Perfect. And do we have any more questions coming through? It is the bell is about to toll on our 30 minutes, but if anybody's quick with their fingers, we could possibly get another one in. In the meantime, while we're potentially waiting for that, just to say thank you. If we have piqued a little bit of interest there, please do make use of our free trial. Try it for yourself. We stand behind our product. We believe it works, and we think you can do a lot of things and onboarding yourself. It is also powerful, so there may come a time where you need to speak to somebody here because it pretty much can do what it says on the tin, but you might need a little bit of advice. So free trial and book a demo or ask any questions that you may have. Which just leaves it for me to say thank you to everybody. I know it's busy schedules, lots of people pushing webinars at the moment, so it's always wonderful to see a reasonably full house. I do have one last question come in. Let's see if we can get it good. Easy automating negative testing. Do I need to give you more?
No, absolutely, because the great thing here is you using assertions. You could go through and perform steps that will result, things like simple thing, like I enter in a username and password, but it's the incorrect password. I click log in and it gives me a message that says you haven't used the correct details. Then you could put an assertion in to say, look for the message that should appear based on you putting in an incorrect email. Could it be a pattern, for example, for a password? So yeah, based on data inputs that you know will drive a negative test, you could assert off the back of it. So yeah, it's a simple example, but yeah, you can do that positive and negative testing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the one we've got here is e.g. fields not accepting certain characters, which I know we're good at. The classic one we do is try to enter too many characters in a field. And obviously we know that it's not going to be able to do so. Good. So that was a little bit sidetracked, but assertion that link is correct.
Yes, the answer is yes, you can. And there can be different ways of doing so. You could store the details of a URL or a link, or you could simply go click on the link or store the href of the link, go to the link, and then assert that the URL you've gone to is the same as the one that was on the link. So simple way of doing it, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, James. I know they were a bit rushed at the end of those questions, but it's really nice to have a lot of questions coming in and a nice lively Q&A session at the end. As I say, try for yourself, get in contact. We will be able to figure something out. If you don't think it'll work, have a go. We might be able to prove you wrong in a nice way. Remains for me to thank James Bent for being his usual steadfast self. Thank you, James.
And to you, sir. Thank you for a great comparing. There you go.
Fabulous. Not wearing jacket and jeans today, though he is a proud wearer of them. Thank you for everybody coming. And it is just for me to say ciao, ciao for now.